Hello everybody and welcome back to the second shelf. Before I start going into the recent reads, I just wanted to say a big thank you for all of you who watched my last video Tuesday, in which I talked about writing, and it was my birthday, and you commented all of your birthday wishes. That was really lovely, and your reaction to all the writing stuff was lovely as well. So thank you very much. But as promised, we now just go back to talking about books. And on this Sunday, I want to talk about some of the books that I read recently, and I also want to chat a little bit about what I'm currently reading. And the first book I want to talk to you about, which I finished last week, is Penk Shepard's The Book of M. I talked about this book already in one of my to-be-released videos, because this was released the beginning of June. Penk Shepard is a young American author. She lives in Arizona. She got an MFA, I believe, from New York, if I remember correctly, but it's so hot that my brain is a bit fried. But I will leave a link to her website down below so you can check out her bio and other stuff if you're interested. The Book of M is a dystopian novel set in the near future, mainly in the US, with some reference to India. We go to India for a little bit. And the premise is that people, for no discernible reason, start losing their shadows. And with that, they start losing their memories. Losing the memory is a slow process. It depends on the person, so it's individual. It can take a week or 2 weeks or a month or 2 months until they don't know anything anymore. They can't even speak. Some don't even know how to breathe. And this epidemic, which is called the Big Forgetting, started in India. That's why we go to India, with one man who, in the middle of a market in India, all of a sudden loses his shadow. And then the epidemic spreads. The book is told from various points of views. We, for instance, have two of the main characters. There's a couple, Orlando Zhang, called Orly, and his wife Maxine, called Max, who they live in Washington, but they went to a wedding somewhere in the countryside, about 2 hours or something drive from Washington when it all happened. And the couple stayed in the resort that they were staying in during the wedding. It's about 2 years when the novel opens after the Big Forgetting hit the US. And then Maxine loses her shadow as well, and she disappears. Orly looks for her. That's one part of the story. Maxine looks for something else, some rumor she heard about a man in New Orleans. So that's another part of the story. And then you get all kinds of different people. A young woman from Tehran who lives in Boston called Naz. She was training for the Olympics when the epidemic hit Boston. We get her and people around her. And there is one man who will play an important role in the book. I'm not going to spoil it for you, but he will play an important role in the book. He has no name in the beginning, and that's because he woke up just before the epidemic hit, so just before the incident in India, from a coma. He was in a car accident, and he has a severe brain injury with retrograde amnesia, which means that he can't remember anything of his life before the accident. Why this amnesiac, as he's called, plays an important role, I'm not going to spoil that for you, but he will sort of be the point where all these different stories come together. Now, I liked the writing. I liked the pacing. It was fast-paced. I thought there were inconsistencies a little bit about what really happened when people lose their shadows, things that were not that well explained, I thought. And it's not, for those of you who are interested, your typical dystopian novel, although it's marketed that way, because it's never quite explained why people, not quite, it's never explained why people lose their shadows, and there is this magical element which reminded me more of a fantasy novel. But still, even though the middle part of the novel was a bit muddled and there were two yeah, there was too much going on. I thought Peng Shepherd tried to include too much into the novel, but I can still recommend it. I mean, first of all, it's a debut, but even if that is of no concern to you, I would recommend it if you want to read, you know, a fast-paced book with an interesting story. But beware of the fact that you shouldn't expect your typical dystopian novel, but that you should expect more of a little bit of gender bender between sci-fi and fantasy. But if that's your thing, I'm sure that you will enjoy it. I certainly did. The next book I read, I want to talk only briefly because I think it's a special interest book, and that is Sabine Hosselfelder, Lost in Math, it's a nonfiction book, came out middle of July, I think, and I requested a copy from NetGalley. Sabine Hosselfelder is a particle physicist, and her book is a reflection on the state in which particle physics is in. How the strive for beauty, for simplicity, for naturalness, in her point of view, sort of curtails research and might lead physics astray. I thought it was really interesting. It was well written, but this is a book only for people who, like me, not only for physicists, not at all, because I'm not, obviously, but I read a lot about physics. So I know, you know, a little bit about quantum mechanics. I know what she means when she talks about naturalness. So I can only recommend this book for people who, like me, you know, are sort of interested in physics and already have an all right working knowledge of particle physics and quantum mechanics and, you know, relativity theory. If you have that, and then I don't mean that you have to be a physicist, but if you have never read anything about physics, this book will bore you to death. But if you did, and if you're interested in the subject, then I can highly recommend it because it gives a really interesting, fresh point of view about research and what physicists should do. There are a lot of interviews included in the book with very famous current physicists about string theory and about the multiverse. So I really thought it was very interesting. And for those of you out there who, you know, read physics books and are interested in it, I can certainly recommend it. And no worries, no more math or physics talks in the rest of the video, and we return to fiction. The next book I finished was a buddy read with Sean over at Sean the Book Maniac. I hope you are all subscribed to him. If not, please do. And that was Michelle de Kretser, The Life to Come. The book was published in 2017, and Michelle de Kretser is an Australian author. She was born in Sri Lanka, but then she moved to Australia when she was in her teens. I've never heard of the author. The book was, you know, talked about a lot over at Kendra Winchester's channel, and I'm reading really not enough Australian authors because it's sometimes hard to come by the books, or you don't hear about the books if they are not published also in the US or in the UK. So all you Australian book viewers out there, please recommend fiction to me, and I mean contemporary fiction. But anyway, the book, The Life to Come, is a novel told in vignettes. It's in 5 sections, and each section has a different point of view and different characters, and there is one overarching character, a young writer, at least when the book opens, she is a young writer, Pippa. She plays a role in all the 5 sections, but only one of the sections is told from her point of view, and it's not that you have a linear story about Pippa told from various point of views, but you have really different life stories from different characters, mainly set in Australia, but we also move to Paris in one section when we have one character called Celeste who's talking about her life. And it's almost a book of short story collections, at least in my experience, but because of this main character Pippa, and we sort of get how her life develops through those 5 sections. So it's a novel, but in a very, you know, vignette-like way. For me, the book, Kendra loved it, so I'm sure there are people out there who love it as well, but for me, and I think also for Sean, it was not quite a success. The writing was fantastic. I liked some of the vignettes more than others, but the overall feel of it for me wasn't quite there. I thought it was too unbalanced in a way. All the characters were quite, you know, negative about politics, about art, about Australia, which was interesting. The satire was interesting at times, but it sort of lacked a counterpoint for me. Plus, as you know, if you're following my channel for any length of time, I'm a very plot-oriented reader, and a book that is mainly character studies, and the overarching plot is, you know, very, very much hidden, and there is not a lot of plot going on. It's just not a book for me. Still, I think Michelle de Kretser is a really interesting writer, and I'm certainly going to check out her previous books. I think she wrote two previous novels, and I will want to read her next book. But I think this is really a book if you are not plot-oriented, if you like beautiful writing, and if character studies that do not lead necessarily anywhere, if that's your thing, then this might be a book for you. The next book I want to talk to you about, I'm just about to finish it, so I'm not gonna give a full review because I always want to, you know, let it sit for a while after I finish a book. And that is another debut novel, Rachel Lyon, Self-Portrait with Boy, which came out earlier this year. I saw a review of this done by Russell over at Ink Paper Blog. So if you want to watch a review, I will leave the link to his review down below. I had this book on my list already, first of all, because I'm, as you know, interested in debut authors, but also because the premise sounded interesting. The book is set in New York in the early 1990s, and the main character is Louise Ryle, Ryle, a 25-year-old, almost starving young artist. She's a photographer who wants to make it, and she makes self-portraits as a project every day. She makes a self-portrait, and her self-portrait number 400, she jumps in front of a window, and just at the moment when the photo is taken, the son of her upstairs neighbors, Katie and Stephen, and their 9-year-old boy Max, falls off the roof, you know, and you see him falling through the window when the photo is taken. So that is the premise. What will Louise do? She, you know, is friends with Kate and Stephen, the parents. The photo is obviously brilliant, but there are all kinds of moral issues, whether she should publish it, whether she should use it to make her mark as a photographer. But the book also deals with 1990s New York, Brooklyn. Lou lives in Brooklyn in a dilapidated former factory, you know, this typical artsy factory with no heating and rats all over. So you have the story about, you know, development, real estate development. Anyway, enough of that. I'm almost done with it, and I will talk more in my next recent reads. And the final book is a book that I really, literally just started today, and that is Claire Louise Bennett, Pond, which was first published in 2015. I talked about this in a book haul I did because it was, for me, really a cover buy. I thought the cover was beautiful. I picked up the book. I read the blurb. I liked the blurb. It's about a young woman in a remote village somewhere in England, and it's described as being a little bit experimental about the life of this woman. The writing is experimental, not the life of the woman. So I was really intrigued by that, And I'm reading this again with Sean from Sean the Book Maniac as a buddy read over the next couple of days. So I will certainly come back to that once I finished it. So these were my recent reads plus almost finished plus current reads. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. As always, I'm looking forward to your comments down below about any of the books I've talked about or any other books you want to tell me about. And I'll see you all soon in my next video. Bye-bye.